Hello again, everybody. Welcome into a very special edition of the Keep Boone Healthy podcast series. I am David Jackson, President and CEO of the Boone Area Chamber of Commerce, and this is the first installment of a series we're calling The Road Home, detailing the Boone Area Chamber of Commerce's move from downtown Boone to a new location on Greenway Road and everything that went into that. So, before we get too far into the packing of boxes and physical move, we have to first address why it was we took on this challenge in the first place. And to help us do that, our good friend Dr. Jim Street from Ridgeline Leadership, who was an essential piece of the very beginning of the story. Dr. Street, always a pleasure to have you with us.
David, thanks for having me here.
So May 24th, 2021, we all hung out. Do you remember much about that conversation?
I do. We hung out over there in a gazebo.
All good conversations start in a gazebo.
Exactly. They do. And we were going to talk about the kind of place that you wanted the new space to be. And we started the conversation with asking everyone who was there, let's just talk about special places. And we all identify those special places in our lives. And it may be the porch swing on our grandmom's front porch, or it could be Bass Lake, just however you wanted to say it. And we talked about those special places, those places that resonated with us, that were sacred space. And after identifying those, we talked about, so what about those places? What makes them so special? And you all talked about, it could have been the experience that you had there. It was because you were with people who cared, because of the comfort in that place, or just something special happened there. And then we all talked about, how can the Boone Chamber's new place become a special place for folks? So that was the beginning of the conversation.
Well, and we even entered into that. I remember calling you and saying, hey, we want you to come and hang out because we know that this was about a year removed from the first part of the whole COVID experience, so a little bit beyond a year from that. And as we started to see some things changing again in terms of interaction, we worked remotely for a year like everybody else did. And we knew that coming back into our space, we needed something different. We wanted a place that could be highly interactive, a place that could be special. And while our King Street location was a lot of things, it also had some challenges to it. That parking was an issue, public space was an issue within that building. So we thought that based on everything that we had done for the past year, that people were going to rely on us more for gathering, for convening, and we had to have a spot to do that. But we also knew that everybody had been working in this virtual world and they might still want to do that some, or they might have seen shifts in their job to the point where doing business in a place or in a physical office may not be the norm, that those remote locations, satellite locations were going to become a thing. So with so many members falling into that category, we wanted a place that people felt welcome, that was a resource for them to sit down in a chair, check their email, do some work, and feel like they were in a welcoming place to do that. And so I remember saying to you, yeah, we need all of these things. And then you start going down this whole road of, well, what are special places? And it took us a little while to get there, but I thought it was very impactful to do it that way because it ultimately helped us create what was a desired tone for the place. Everybody can have an office, but it's about creating that warm environment that will make people gravitate toward a location. And with that comes opportunity. And I think that's where this really then took the next step was, if we create this special place, what can come from having the special place? And I think having you facilitate that conversation certainly got more out of us than we would have if we'd have just sat around a table and said, what do we want to do?
Yeah. When I I remember we talked a lot about innovation. Could this be a space? Could this be like a think tank space? Wouldn't it be great if folks um, needed a little bit of creativity, and there was some place in the chamber offices. It's like I go there because I know I'll be welcomed, uh, but it's a space um, where new ideas can grow. So yeah, here's an opportunity, and that's the beauty of well, the beauty. Um, what COVID did was give it gave the opportunity for folks to think about what could be next.
And that became this plan. So we took the notes and the thoughts that you gave us on May 24th, 2021, and kind of went back to the drawing board a little bit to think about not only what the space was, but how the organization needed to evolve into the space. And that was all very much a symbiotic process, because we knew that the chamber that existed in March of 2020 was going to need some additional things to it. Part of that was space.
Mhm.
Part of that was the resource that comes with being able to convene folks. And what does that look like? What do people want? What did COVID do to change our work philosophy in terms of the physical space? So we were able to incorporate some of those design elements. One of the things I wondered if you could get into, though, because we talked about this at length in this conversation, was the need to adapt. We were very clear in that we couldn't go back. We couldn't go back to just the way things were and pick up like it was March 14th, 2020. And that's not always easy to do because we get so involved in the day to day. Sometimes it's hard to look down the road, and certainly you and Ridgeline leadership help get that kind of thought process going for people. But that seems to still be going on today, even as people are moving back into some operational norms. I think normal looks so much different than it did 2 years ago, and you have to talk about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of adapting, I'm going to have to adapt right now. My computer's about to run out of power.
You are there. You go.
It's good to be back. Yeah, it's it isn't like the literature showed up about agility and adaptability and pivoting. It didn't show up during COVID. It was discussed a lot more, and the kinds of conversations I had with different companies and businesses, it was around the need to adapt. And but this conversation has been going on. It is this is going to be critical. Organizations need to talk about uh, because you may have to adapt just because of a changing of customer behavior, because that's always evolving. But one thing that this pandemic did, it did give us that opportunity it forced companies. Some companies didn't make it, uh, and those that did took the time and had the conversations about how to change. When I think about going to restaurants in Boone, and I've always lamented because in other towns there's so much outdoor seating. And of course, it makes sense that we don't have outdoor seating in Boone because that's a big investment that only pays off for about 5 or 6 months out of the year up here in the mountains. The pandemic forced restaurants to do a lot of outdoor seating. Now we have at so many restaurants some amazing outdoor seating. I hope they hold on to it and it continues to serve them. But that's a great example of folks who had to adapt, and it turned out hopefully for the better going into the future.
So we utilized Ridgeline Leadership to put together a strategic framework, and that process began back in 2019, and we actually authored that in the middle of the pandemic. That is a whole other podcast to get into. But one of the things I think that came out of that process was not being afraid to think about things that don't necessarily have the road built in front of them. And what I mean by that is when we entered into this conversation about space, our building was not for sale. We were putting together kind of a, I don't want to call it hypothetical, but the best case reality for us. And then yeah, we'll start to build toward this as we come through the pandemic and we get out to the other side. We're going to have marching orders. And then all of that happened very quickly, and we'll get into that as we continue to tell this story. But I think there's some value in dreaming a little bit, because not only does it help motivate you in a direction that may take you to something that you've never done before. In this case, we had ready for us when opportunity came knocking, a credible plan that was hatched internally that we were able to go to very quickly. And had we not had that conversation, if we not met in the gazebo, I'm not sure if we're able to take advantage of everything in the quick sequence that ultimately came to be for us revisioning our new headquarters. How do you entice people to do that, to have the dream, to have the dream conversation every once in a while, to make sure that there's always something that you're aspiring to be?
Well, I will say it's hard in regular times. It's difficult. I mean, time is one of your most important resources, and limited resources. And it's hard to convince organizations to stop everything and take the time to recenter. Coming out of the pandemic, this is like the perfect time to have that kind of conversation. Again, it'll be hard to carve out the time, and I understand that, but it is so worth it. This opportunity to recenter, to reflect on the mission and purpose, the values that drive everyday work, the vision. Where are we going? Where are we? What is our present state, and what is our desired state? Where do we want to go? It's so critical to have that conversation at any point. What I've been doing with organizations is telling them, like, now it's like the ideal time, because it's almost like the pandemic, coming out of it, can be the excuse. Let's stop everything. We have been in crisis mode for quite some time. We know that there is a better mode to be in, and that is where we can talk about relationships within the organization and with all of our stakeholders. We need to talk about what processes are working and not working. We ought to look internally, and what do we do better than anyone else? Where are our strengths? What are the areas of weaknesses where we need to focus? We need to look at outside of the organization. There are opportunities. A lot of companies found opportunities during COVID. That kind of conversation needs to happen all the time. So taking time out can be very critical for an organization going forward.
So we came up with some buzz phrases that day. I remember Delta Sky Club sticks out. And a little bit about what we will soon reveal in terms of the plan of this new facility, but we wanted something that had a little bit of everything. And if you've ever been in an airline sky club or an airline club at the airport, that special place behind the hidden door, that those places have a little bit of public space, a little bit of semi-private space, some private space, some office space, a nice restroom, some coffee. So we wanted to incorporate all of that. Do you remember how you were able to distill what it was we were talking about? And I guess where I'm going here is, it's okay to throw out something that you have to get to, rather than everything just being an absolute. You just kind of throw out this idea. Here it is. Here's a plan. Here's a phrase. Let's catch up to the phrase.
First, reflecting back on creating the Sky Club, when you are in an airport and you walk by the Sky Club, and especially if you've been in one, it's like, man, I really want to go in there. I know that space. It's such a nice space. It would be great. And the whole idea is that as business owners go by the new chamber office, it's like, man, I want to go in there. Well, as a chamber member, you're invited in. And so I look forward to that happening. I think, sometimes it's what I really enjoy about conversations that I have with companies, businesses, is when they find language that resonates. And again, that's the beauty of taking the time out and having a conversation. With a lot of organizations, I'll get them to talk about what is the day-to-day minutia that they have to do. They do those things to an end, a goal. The reason why we do this is to reach a certain goal. In the end, though, there is a greater purpose. And examples, I was at a nursing home and they were talking about the day-to-day, just keeping the place clean, or more specifically, everything that people have to do in a nursing home, sweeping the floor, to what end, keeping the place clean is the goal. Then their conversation went to why they do everything, and they landed on helping people die with dignity and making families feel really good about the decision about putting loved ones in a nursing home. And when they found that language about their higher purpose, that's what they were able to hold into. That's what can become a mission statement. So I think organizations just taking the time to go through, what do we do? What is the basic goal that we're shooting for? And then what is that higher purpose? That's what leaders can take forward when they bring in new staff. And as we know, there's a lot of new staff in a lot of the businesses in town because of the pandemic. Now's the time to have the conversation. And if you get that language that resonates with you because of the work that you're doing, that's what motivates people to come into work. And it's clear, especially with the younger generation, they're looking for meaning in their work. So if the conversation is more about the meaning, that's what's going to keep them connected to where you are.
That's a great point. And it transitions nicely into the final question I want to ask you in this chapter of the story, for a business that may be ready to have their gazebo moment. What's your advice about any trepidation around that? Because that can be a scary place sometimes. You start talking about something, it's hard to put that back in the box. Once you verbalize something and get a team behind it, there's some realization that maybe you get to a point where in the conversation, hey, you know what, that idea wasn't going to work because of things, but it will likely lead to the next thing. So sometimes people are a little bit intimidated by taking that step. What's your advice to just going ahead and going down that road?
I think about the first step is taking the time. It's like, we hardly have time, or just the thought, I'm about to do a retreat with a group, and I'm getting some information about, or hearing that some people are saying, I hope this is worth our time. It's more like this better be worth our time. And so it's difficult to go into that space where you're going to have a real conversation where people have to be real. They have to be authentic. Yeah, there's something a little scary about that. Every time I do a retreat, regardless of how people come into the space, I love the energy that people leave with. They have better connections with the folks they work with. And as we know, with some companies, they get a little big and there are silos. So this conversation really breaks that down. And they have tangible action items. And that's what people are looking for, is not just a nice time to spend with each other that we normally don't have. But now what? What is going to happen as a result of our time together? And so leaving with action items can be powerful. So whether you're doing a strategic plan, a SWOT analysis where you're looking at strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, all critical conversations, but more critical is leaving with action items so people feel like it was worth their time and something is going to happen as a result. And ideally, and this is where I sell it, you're looking for more time. The time you take to have the important conversation is going to lead to a better use of time going forward. And so you'll make up that time in so many ways.
Well, we certainly appreciate your time and our gazebo time. And feel free to put that as a sellable item in your online store. Gazebo time with Dr. Street. Just make sure that we get a cut of that, and everything's great. But no, one of the things that we hope to share through this telling of our story is the number of chamber partners and members that help make this possible. And we could not have done anything forward that we'll tell you about from here without this initial conversation in the gazebo one really nice sunny day back in May of 2021 with Dr. Jim Street. So thank you very much for your guidance and your continued prodding. And we'll let you be one of the first through the door. How about that?
Awesome. Thank you so much.